Welcome to my video. Subscribe now. A perfect morning. The sun rose over Miami International Airport on May 11, 1996, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. It was a Saturday, and the terminal buzzed with the energy of weekend travelers. Families heading to Disney World, business people catching early flights, and couples escaping for romantic getaways filled the departure gates with cheerful conversation and laughter. Captain Candalyn Kubeck stood near gate G2, reviewing her flight checklist one more time. She was 44 years old, with kind eyes and a confident smile that put nervous passengers at ease. Candalyn had been flying for years, and she loved every moment of it. The feeling of lifting off the ground, of guiding a plane through the clouds, of bringing people safely to their destinations, it never got old. Beside her, First Officer Richard Hazen studied the weather reports. Richard was younger, only 52, with steady hands and a calm demeanor. He and Candalyn made a good team. They had flown together before, and they trusted each other completely. "Looks like smooth skies all the way to Atlanta," Richard said, looking up from his papers. "Should be an easy flight." Candalyn nodded. "Let's make it a good one." In the passenger cabin, flight attendants moved through the aisles, helping people stow their luggage and find their seats. There were 105 passengers on Flight 592 that morning, mothers and fathers, grandparents and children, friends and strangers who would share this journey together. Near the front of the plane, a young mother named Jennifer settled into her seat with her 2-year-old daughter on her lap. The little girl pressed her face against the window, mesmerized by the plane's taxiing on the tarmac. "Look, Mommy, big airplane," the child said, her voice filled with wonder. Jennifer smiled and kissed the top of her daughter's head. "Yes, sweetie, and we're going to fly on one too." A few rows back, an elderly couple held hands. They were celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary with a trip to see their grandchildren in Atlanta. The husband squeezed his wife's hand gently, and she leaned her head on his shoulder. In the cargo hold beneath them, baggage handlers loaded suitcases, boxes, and cargo. Among the items being loaded were 5 cardboard boxes. Inside those boxes were expired oxygen generators, devices that create oxygen through a chemical reaction when activated. They had been removed from another aircraft during maintenance work. The workers who packed them didn't know these generators were dangerous. They didn't know that if triggered, they would produce intense heat hot enough to start a fire. The boxes were labeled, but not properly. They were supposed to have safety caps on them, but they didn't. Nobody knew that these boxes would change everything. Part 2. Into the sky. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Flight 592 pushed back from the gate. Captain Kubeck's voice came over the intercom, warm and reassuring. "Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. This is your captain speaking. We're heading to Atlanta this afternoon, with an estimated flight time of about an hour and 5 minutes. We've got beautiful weather ahead, so sit back, relax, and enjoy the flight." The passengers settled in. Some read magazines. Others closed their eyes for a quick nap. Jennifer played a quiet game with her daughter, making funny faces that made the little girl giggle. The engines roared to life, and the plane began its taxi down the runway. Faster and faster it rolled, until that magical moment when the wheels lifted off the ground and Flight 592 was airborne. Miami fell away beneath them, becoming smaller and smaller until it looked like a toy city. The flight climbed to its cruising altitude of 26,000 feet. The seat belt sign chimed off. Flight attendants began preparing the beverage service. Everything was normal. Everything was fine. Until it wasn't. Part 3. The problem. 6 minutes into the flight, something went terribly wrong in the cargo hold. One of the oxygen generators had activated. Perhaps it was jostled during takeoff. Perhaps it was triggered by the vibration of the engines. Whatever the reason, it began producing oxygen and heat, tremendous, dangerous heat. The temperature in that small space began to rise. The cardboard boxes started to smolder, then to burn. Fire spread quickly in the confined space, feeding on the very oxygen the generators were producing. Smoke began seeping into the passenger cabin. In the cockpit, Captain Kubeck and First Officer Hazen noticed it first, a strange haze in the air, an acrid smell. They exchanged concerned glances. "Do you see that?" Candalyn asked, her voice calm but alert. "Yeah, I see it," Richard replied. He checked the instruments, looking for any sign of what might be wrong. The smoke grew thicker. Now passengers were noticing it too. Concerned murmurs rippled through the cabin. Jennifer pulled her daughter close, her heart beginning to race. "We've got some smoke in the cockpit," Candalyn radioed to air traffic control, her voice still steady. "We need to turn around. We need to return to Miami." "Flight 592, you're cleared to return," came the immediate response. "Descend and maintain 7,000 feet. Richard worked the controls, banking the plane around. His hands moved with practiced precision, even as the smoke grew thicker around them. Candalyn kept her focus on the instruments, calling out their altitude, their heading, their speed. But in the cargo hold, the fire was growing. The heat was intense now, weakening the aircraft's control systems. The flames were consuming everything they touched. Part 4. The fight. The pilots couldn't see. The smoke was too thick now, stinging their eyes, filling their lungs. But they kept flying. They kept fighting. "We need more altitude," Richard said, his voice strained. "We're not going to make it like this. Miami, we need the closest available airport," Candalyn radioed. Her voice was still controlled, still professional, even as fear must have been clawing at her heart. They were only 10 miles from Miami. So close. But the fire was winning. The plane was losing its battle with the sky. In the cabin, flight attendants tried to calm the passengers even as they must have been terrified themselves. The elderly couple held each other. Jennifer wrapped her arms around her daughter, whispering that everything would be okay, even though she wasn't sure it would be. The plane began to descend, faster than it should. The pilots were losing control. The fire had damaged critical systems. Below them, the Florida Everglades stretched out, mile after mile of sawgrass, water, and wilderness. Captain Kubeck and First Officer Hazen fought until the very end. They never gave up. They never stopped trying to save their passengers, to save their plane. Their last words to air traffic control were calm, professional, brave. At 2:13 p.m., just 11 minutes after leaving the ground, Flight 592 disappeared from radar. Part 5. Aftermath. The plane crashed into the Everglades at over 500 miles per hour. There were no survivors. 110 people, passengers and crew, lost their lives that day. The recovery effort was one of the most difficult in aviation history. The Everglades are unforgiving. Alligators, snakes, and nearly impenetrable terrain made every moment of the search dangerous and heartbreaking. Investigators eventually found the truth. They discovered the oxygen generators. They learned about the fire. They understood what had gone wrong. The disaster led to sweeping changes in aviation safety. New rules were put in place about how hazardous materials must be handled, labeled, and transported. Airlines revised their procedures. The FAA implemented stricter regulations. Captain Candalyn Kubeck and First Officer Richard Hazen were honored for their professionalism and courage in the face of impossible circumstances. They had fought to save their passengers until the very end. Epilogue. Remembering. Today, there is a memorial in the Everglades where Flight 592 came to rest. Family members sometimes visit, leaving flowers and photographs. The names of all 110 victims are engraved there, remembered forever. Jennifer and her daughter. The elderly couple celebrating their anniversary. Captain Kubeck and First Officer Hazen. Every single person on that plane had a story, had dreams, had people who loved them. Their loss led to changes that have saved countless lives since. Every safety procedure that came from this tragedy honors their memory. Every pilot who flies more safely because of these new rules carries their legacy forward. The sky is safer now because of what happened that May afternoon. But that's cold comfort to the families who lost loved ones, to the children who grew up without parents, to the parents who buried their children. ValuJet Flight 592 reminds us that safety is never an accident. It's the result of vigilance, proper procedures, and learning from our mistakes, no matter how painful those lessons might be. The sun still rises over Miami International Airport every morning, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Planes still take off, carrying passengers to their destinations. And somewhere in the Everglades, a memorial stands as a quiet reminder of the 110 souls who never made it home. May they rest in peace. May they never be forgotten.